Later this week, The Accountant 2 releases. So before that drops in theaters, let's talk about The Accountant, which came out in 2016, directed by Gavin O'Connor, starring Ben Affleck, Anna Kendrick, J.K. Simmons, and Jon Bernthal. This movie is about how a math savant is uncooking some books for a new client as the U.S. Treasury closes in as the body counts start to rise. But this math expert, this accountant, also deals with autism. So there is some unique layers with this film. So we're going to go over the entirety of The Accountant and if you, as a Christian, should watch it right now. Hello everyone, welcome to the channel. I am your host Tim and we exist to help Christians live in the world, not of the world, by utilizing our convictions in the movies and shows we watch. The Accountant is rated R for some strong action and violence and some strong language throughout. So I'm going to go over any convictions you might have that may prevent you from watching The Accountant, any theological themes present within this film, and wrap it up with a personal review from yours truly. Without further ado, let's dive into the Christian Conviction Meter. If this is your first time here, the Christian Conviction Meter is a series of 5 convictions: violence and gore, lust, substances, profanity, and intense/horror sequences. All of these are areas that may hinder or distract you from your relationship with Jesus. We do not want to do that. We want you to follow Jesus and become more like him to your best of your abilities here on earth. So these are things that may prevent you from watching this particular film. Without further ado, let's dive into our first category. And starting off with violence and gore, this is arguably our strongest category within the film because this is an action movie. And this is a very shooter-heavy film because it kind of has the subgenre of one versus all in the action film category. And so there is a lot of shooting and combat that takes place within the film. There are multiple firearms used of all different types and calibers. You have some snipers, you have some handguns, you have some more AR type of weaponry, and a few other things here as well that do take place within the film. On top of that, there is blood, there is some goriness in that sort of range of just people dying, and there is multiple deaths contained within the film. So there are these things to be cautious of. On top of that, I do want to take this very safely and sensitively. There are also a few moments of some people who have been shot in the head. We do see some moments of someone getting shot through the temple, but for the most part, most of what we see is someone who is already passed away with a bullet wound right in their head. So there are these things to be wary of, to be cautious of. Again, this is a pretty action-oriented film, which means the violence and gore, with it being rated R, is high. It's a 5 out of 5 in this category. Luckily for us, though, our next category, which is lust, has nothing. There is no nudity, no sexualness or sensualness that is contained within this film. It's a straightforward action film. There's a bit of romance that is teased within the film between our lead character and another character here, but it doesn't really go much of anywhere other than just talking. And so for those reasons, it's just a 0 out of 5 here. There's nothing to worry about in the lust category. Our next category is substances, and when it comes to alcohol, there is a bit of social drinking. However, there really isn't much of that in this film. There is just bits and pieces here and there. The most we do see specifically from substances is our lead character, because he has autism and also a few other things along with that. He uses a prescription. He has a prescription for just what he needs to get through the day, and specifically to get through the night. And so he does take those pills, but other than that, there really isn't much else shown in terms of drugs or alcohol. There is, however, some references to smuggling and drug cartels, just given the nature of this film and the accountant character. Those are things to kind of keep in mind, things to consider. I'm going to give this a 2 out of 5 here. It could be higher if you do struggle with some of these areas, but the biggest thing here is something that is prescribed. It's not just taking it for the fun of it. It is something that is medically needed for the character. Moving on to profanity, there's a decent amount contained within the film. To go over briefly, hell is used, the SH word is used, the BI word is used. There also is various forms of those two, such as son of a BI and bull SH are also used within this film. On top of that, the A word is used, PR word is used, as well as, of course, DA and God DA. But the biggest one of all that is contained within this film is the use of just F-bombs. There is plenty of them around. According to the IMDB parent guide, where we base a lot of our information, there is about 29 said throughout the entire film, but there's a lot of language here to be present for. It is a rated R film, so they do take advantage of that with those means. That being said, it is going to be a 5 out of 5 here. Wrapping it up with our last category here with intense and horror scenes. This is not a horror film, so there are no horror scenes contained within this movie, but there are some elements here that are really intense. First things first, this is not always the case with someone with autism, but there is a level of aggression and lashing out that does take place in flashbacks of our lead character. There are moments here where he doesn't understand what he's going on and his brain is just in all sorts. And so what best he can do to react is to scream and yell and throw things. And so there is a bit of intensity that comes with that situation in that scenario. On top of that, there is also a couple things here with some kids fighting. Again, more flashback scenes here, whether it is for like training purposes or it is just brawling to deal with bullies. There are these things that take place here. On top of that, this does get into a bit of spoiler territory, but I do want to prep you beforehand in case you do decide to watch this movie. There is a scene where a parental figure leaves the family. They've had too much, so they decide to leave and leave the rest of the family on their own. The biggest, I'd say, intensity, other than some of just the action and stuff that we've gone over, is there is a torture scene that is contained within the film. It's kind of the main driver of this story, but we don't see that till later in the film. And so what happens is there is this torture scene, and it is pretty brutal and it is pretty dark and intense. So that is something to keep in mind here. With that being said, it's going to be a 5 out of 5 here in particular, mainly because of the fact of the torture scene and a bit of the brutality of it, but just the intense nature of that scene. So our grand total on the Christian conviction meter for The Accountant is a 17 out of 25. It is a bit higher on the conviction meter, not as high as some other projects of a similar caliber. Again, this is just to help you figure out whether or not this is a appropriate movie for you to watch that doesn't distract or hinder your relationship with Jesus. If that's the case and you're okay with that, well, I'll give you my thoughts here in a second. But if this is a film that you just feel like one of those areas is just too high for you, or you struggle with a particular area, I would say hold off. But with that being said, let's talk about some theological themes that may be present within The Accountant. And in terms of the Bible, Jesus, Christianity, the church, there is nothing. There's nothing here in regards to any of that. There is kind of the overarching umbrella part of the story, which is moral codes and morality, and our lead character kind of having his own moral code. And again, that's not explicitly a biblical theme, but I do want to recognize that we as Christians, we are given our own moral code, our own morality, and that comes from explicitly scripture. It comes from the Bible. It comes from God himself, the 10 commandments, God's laws, right? The Sermon on the Mount, all these different things are a part of the morality that God has given to us. There is a sense of right and wrong that we are given as Christians through the words of scripture. So that is something to keep in mind. But again, even that in and of itself is not explicitly tying back to Christianity in any way, shape, or form. It's just an observation I made. Again, like I said, there is nothing Christian about this movie. So that is something to keep in mind. With that wrapped up, let's talk about my thoughts. What do I think of The Accountant? And overall, this is a very unique film. It kind of takes the sub-genre of action of this one guy versus all sort of thing that we've seen throughout kind of the late 2010s with stuff like John Wick and Nobody and some of these other films that have happened, but it does it with a twist. Because of the nature of who Christian Wolf is, we get to kind of explore the different sides of him as an accountant, as a soldier, as someone with autism, and it just creates something very unique and something very different than what we've seen with something like a Nobody or a John Wick or any of these other one versus all sort of action stories. And overall, the story here is pretty solid. I think Ben Affleck does a really good job at portraying some of the different symptoms or ways that autism kind of affects. Again, I know that's not the case for every single person who is diagnosed with some level of autism, but I think the way they use the character and the stuff he's gifted at because of what he has, it just translates very, very well. And I think, again, Ben Affleck does a really solid job. And our cast of characters here, our side characters, are overall pretty solid as well. And you have some really strong actors who have been quote-unquote legends or big times in Hollywood that are a part of this movie. And overall, I think it just lends to creating a very real and believable world. And it also just creates a really solid action story. And in terms of that action, it's pretty good. I would say there are definitely better action films out there, but the twist is good enough to separate it from any other sort of action film. On top of that, the ending, at least for me, wasn't all that fulfilling. I did kind of feel like, oh, that's where we're ending. Like, okay. I mean, cool, but it didn't feel fulfilling as I thought it would potentially feel. At the same time, too, there are moments where this film does jump to a lot of different things, and it can get just a tad confusing, but not super terrible of like, oh my gosh, what the heck is going on? But there are moments that can feel just a little weird. But again, I don't think that takes away from what they're trying to accomplish, what they're trying to do with this story in particular. And overall, I think it's a solid movie. This was my first time watching the movie. I know it came out in 2016, but it was one of those movies that I was interested in, but never like wanted to really dive deep. And obviously with the sequel coming out later this week, this was the appropriate time to dive into this story, and it was pretty solid. I enjoyed it for the most part. Not the best action movie I've seen, but it still was pretty enjoyable. So for those reasons, I'm going to give it a 7.7 out of 10. Overall, a solid time. So overall, it's a 17 out of 25 on the conviction meter. It's a 7.7 out of 25 on our review scale. Those are my thoughts, so let me know yours down in the comments below. Let's chat all things about The Accountant in the comments below, and I'll see you all over there. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to spend time with us here. We truly appreciate it. But before you go, consider hitting that like and subscribing. It just sends us out into the algorithm, allows us to reach more Christians so they can utilize their convictions to follow Jesus better. And of course, as per usual, there are a few videos here that YouTube is recommending to you. Maybe they nailed it, maybe they didn't. Feel free to check those out. We'll see you all over there.